It may sound like I'm going to be arguing with you, but I don't think I'm arguing with you. So get ready for that,
mm,
which is that given the dice system that we discussed, which has a much more consequential and a much less, okay, now you talk feel to it, right? It's a
mm,
more punchy dice system than the one you had
yeah,
in place earlier. Given
yeah,
that, to roll early and often
mm,
is going to help you with the goal you just mentioned, which is to take what we did during session 0, during the preparation,
mm,
and deliver it back to us, and then have the events of play suddenly surge forward, but you don't have to push anything and you don't have to keep making up anything.
mm,
Because the dice and the way they work now are going to create a much richer situation. So, if you don't mind me saying, by the time that May Garner goes to the mayor's house and of basically everything by the end of the seance, everything after that felt very uh, scattered. You know, it's kind of like we just kind
yeah,
of walk around and push things and say, I do this. And, you know,
yeah, yeah,
and so what I'm trying to get at is this: what if we had the opportunity for a dice roll
yeah,
during the seance while interacting with the curse? And,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
the,
That's a good, really good idea,
uh,
and that I think if you interpret that as a kind of a, you could build that into the first session, that you
exactly,
kind of
there's
have something.
that's one of two places, and I think it's the more important of the two potentially.
Mm,
And so the question really becomes, uh, when do we as players know when there's a possibility for a roll? And this,
mm,
can I provide you with two contrasting games for
yeah,
this?
yeah,
And this may be based on a misreading of one of the games. So I want to give credit. I want to point out that what I'm saying about one of the games may be wrong,
mm,
but my point is not wrong about the contrast in general. And this is to look at Dogs in the Vineyard.
yeah.
And
I was just talking about.
right,
I was thinking about in the character creation in Dogs in the Vineyard,
yeah,
you have this, like, in the character creation,
you
you have
have that
this
conflict.
one
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to. That's a different topic from what I'm talking about now, though.
Mm,
I'm talking now about situations of confrontation, potentially dangerous difficulty, and things like that. And in the game Sorcerer, rolling is not negotiable. And it's specifically a point of game mastering Sorcerer that you never, ever bypass a situation where the dice are required. The circumstances of requiring a roll are highly explicit. And when you encounter them in play, you must roll. The game master cannot, for example, decide that somebody, if they are known not to be in a particular location and they want to get there and your character wants to get there, you must roll. You cannot say, oh, it would be cool if they get there first. Oh, I'll just let you get there first. You can't
mm,
do that in Sorcerer. The same thing goes for a wide variety of other things. That in many games, it's thought, well, I can just say how that goes.
mm,
and it's part of my game
But
master
you are
direction
you're
ability.
totally right, because
Well,
what you felt what after the seance, then kind of improvisation started,
right, but
and then
right,
and but for my part,
right, right,
yeah,
and
not for your part, because
right.
you kind of
Well, we were
then
just playing, right? That's
what I was probably what I was I think something else happened. I think my kid woke up, and
right.
or
That happened too. Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, but let's not like focus on that, because
It.
what I was probably thinking was that I wanted to end with the end of the seance, so we kind of started. So I that was probably a part that wasn't part of my plan.
Right. Well, okay. I mean, I understand that, but let's focus on my contrast. I just
Mm,
described what I was talking about with Sorcerer and its absolute requirement to roll in
mm,
many situations of play.
yeah.
And the game master does not have the textual or even implicit ability to set the scene, to interpret events so that they come together in a certain way. Many of those variables in that game are subject to rolls. Even when something you're thinking, this would be great if this happened, if they, and then the dice don't obey, and the dice say, no, sorry, that person gets there first. They're going to get the thing.
Mm.
I don't care how cool it was if that other person
But
got the thing. So
this sounds very easy. Is it always that easy to determine where to roll
you
and
would
not
be
to
a little
roll
bit
as a?
surprised once you get used to it. What's hard about it in Sorcerer is to overcome your habit of taking over as cinematographer
Mm,
and film director. You have to
mm,
let go of your controlling Stanley Kubrick, right, who masters everything on the set. And
yeah.
you have to let go of your Stanley Kubrick, right? The dice
My
are your Stanley Kubrick.
But what I realized that is that the overall rule system for this, especially when it comes to the part with the flags, that we have almost not even discussed or played with, the flags kind of forces it kind of not forces, but it kind of makes the story very character driven, as most of the.
I understand that that's where we are going to get. Let me
Yeah.
continue with my contrast because I have only talked about Sorcerer.
Okay.
So
Yes.
if we go to Dogs in the Vineyard, and again, with any apologies to Vincent if I misrepresent it, but I'm not misrepresenting it in general because it applies to many other games, which is the concept of say yes or roll the dice.
Yeah. That's
Right.
a
And
Vincent
what I'm trying to say
thing.
is that as often interpreted, it is the idea that the game master looks at the situation and either they say, well, like for example, something that someone proposes that they do, and the game master can say, oh, well, yeah, do that, or yeah, that sure, and or the game master in the very same circumstances say, that calls for a roll.
Yeah.
Okay, Sorcerer doesn't do that. There are things, circumstances in which there is no roll. Resolution occurs and there is no roll. That can happen in Sorcerer, but that happens in some circumstances. In the other circumstances, you must roll. So there's no choice. There is no say yes or roll the dice. There's
In
no
prime
choice.
time, we had
Right.
when playing prime time with you, we had this. I don't see no conflict.
Right. But in which
That's
case
one
you
of
don't
those.
use it.
No.
But you can never say, I do see a conflict, but I don't feel we need the card draw. We'll just say what happens. You never say that in Primetime Adventures. If there's a conflict, you must use the cards.
Mm.
And so there's no way to have now. Here's the important thing: in Primetime Adventures, the players know that either the producer or they can put up their hand and say, there's a conflict here. We aren't going anywhere until the cards come out. And the player can do that, or the producer can do that, which is, by the way, taken from Trollbabe. The rule that when it comes to calling or identifying a particular conflict, we are all equals at the table, and we all should be doing it. Right?
I mean, the ideal game is, ideal situation is everyone taking responsibility of that.
Right. Nobody let a conflict slip past. Okay. We have mechanics for this. And the same thing goes for Primetime Adventures, which, as Matt acknowledges, is highly derived from Trollbabe in many ways. And then you have the situation in Sorcerer. They're all very similar. You cannot to let a conflict slip by without going to the relevant mechanics is literally against the rules. Right? And so in the case of, if I'm misreading it, then I am, but let's say that Dogs in the Vineyard can be interpreted that you can let it slip by without the dice if the game master feels like it. And so,
I think that you, but I think it doesn't have. It's not only about game master control.
No.
It's also about like conflict, avoiding conflict with the players.
Okay,
right?
Possibly. I'm not talking about game master control at all, because what I'm talking about, that contrast can apply no matter who's allowed to call the conflict, right? No matter who. I am talking about whether.
But I mean, saying yes is that I want to be a nice game master,
right?
And I want to encourage you of being. Oh, this is a great idea. Of course, this will happen.
Right. You like
you
it.
Don't want to be
let's not mess with it. Right. I get that.
Exactly.
Now that, however, if you look underneath that particular principle, as if it were a rock, and you look underneath, you will see some very horrible. Now, I'm a biologist, so I don't think any grubs are horrible. But in symbolic literary terms, when you pick up a rock and look underneath it and you see all the squirming grubs, you are supposed to be horrified. Okay. So I'm saying that.
Do you know what I'm seeing?
Hold on. If you pull up that rock, if you look under the principle of, well, I want to be a good, nice game master. You had a good idea. I like the idea. Let's just say that happens. The grubs underneath it, you know what those are? It's a belief that physical mechanics, will fuck everything up.
Yeah.
That's the fear that underlies that principle, that you can't really trust those fucking things. They're going to mess things up.
They destroy the immersion and all that crap. But
that's part of it too.
We don't believe that anyway. But I think
it's not just the anti-immersion thing. It's also the idea that if you employ them, their little outcomes will give you things that you might not want, or they may not be what you previously imagined, or they might force you to change something, and we don't want that. According to some.
I'm more, but there's also that aspect when you look at many of the games, is that you have this good story going, and then you have this rule system that is like extremely complicated. So when we say, okay, this sounds like a conflict for me, everybody says, all right, okay, let's consult all the
right. Everybody roll up their sleeves and
Look at
right. And, no, I get
I bring out my
but what we're really talking about here is bad design.
Exactly.
Okay? Because nobody ever complained about a system, no matter how complicated, if the system addressed what we cared about and if the system had consequences that made us excited. Nobody ever, you can have the most complex system. You can have, Rolemaster and Rifts can have a baby.
Yeah.
And we could
I've
play
never
that
played
system.
Rifts, but I played a lot of Rolemaster.
Right, but if you could, Rifts is insane. So imagine all of the layering of Rolemaster and then make it insane. Okay, now we could play that, and if it met those criteria, we would claim that system was simple and transparent.